Okay. So I've been just sitting, taking a few deep breaths. I think we're all, for those of you that are listening later, this class is being taught the day after quite uh, the riots in our capital. And I think we're all a little wobbly and finding our bearing. And it's interesting to be talking about Sagittarius at a time like this, because Sagittarius has so much to do with our ideals and our vision and our aspirations and the horizon to which we want to move. So it's actually good to be talking, I think, about Sagittarius at this time, because the moon is in Scorpio today as we're recording this. And, that's kind of intense given our current circumstances. I really do feel like at this moment in time, we're in this kind of burning ground. We're in this kind of in-between time right now. And it's going to require a lot of resetting and a lot of inner surrender, inner releasing into the present, and keeping our eye. It's such a Sagittarius gesture that I'm even doing, our eye on the prize, kind of, keeping our eye on the true vision that we can hold for ourselves, which is a conscious and loving and united humanity. And, it's kind of perfect that we get to talk about Sagittarius today. It's the final fire sign. And we're also in a very Aquarian time at this time. So we get to talk about Aquarius and Sagittarius, and they love each other because Sagittarius says it's time to move towards the new. We cannot sit any longer. There has to be progress. And Aquarius has its own version of that. So, I like to say of Sagittarius that we've been going along with the different fire signs. We've already covered all the way from Aries to Scorpio. And I like to say that Aries is like the match that we strike, and it's a new idea, but then it blows out, and a new idea, and then it blows out. Leo is like the pot-bellied stove, or like the campfire that's like, I am warming you consistently 360 degrees. And Sagittarius is kind of like this directed fire. Now, can Sagittarius burn things up and go in lots of different directions, and sometimes not have that blazing fire be for the best? Yes. But when it's really directed and clear, it moves and it ignites and it inspires. So by way of gently introducing ourselves into this sign, I find that I've written two very Sagittarius poems in my life, and I'm going to read you one of them. And some of you have undoubtedly heard it before, but that's okay. We get to hear poems a couple times and let them land in our hearts. And this one is so Sagittarian that I can't help but read it to you. And it's called The Quivering, but also remember, a quiver of arrows. Have you ever heard that phrase? A quiver of arrows. And so an arrow, think about the bow being stretched and how we quiver when the bow is stretched before it's loosed into the world. So this is called The Quivering. I wrote it, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years ago. If we but make friends with the quivering, the subtle and not so subtle shaking of the body and all its parts, letting go of what we've held on to long enough. If we but soften the grasp on who we have always been to make room for what can be, knowing not what may appear, knowing only the quivering. And I ask, is not some part of us always dying? And I ask, are we not every day in some small way reborn? Then just as the wild animal shakes off the fear of attack, we too can shake off the fears that want to eat us whole. We can walk barefoot in the woods with a quiver of arrows, cautious of what still wants to ensnare us, but alive with the light emanating from our newly trodden path. Are we not path makers? So we are. Are we not pathfinders? So we are. Do arrows not quiver before they are loosed into the world? Then so must we. Finally, we are archer and arrow at once, sprung into the wind, carried swiftly, silently, precisely to our very heart, pierced and present. And so, what's so very Sagittarian about that is Sagittarius, so many things, but Sagittarius at its highest level is the arrow of intuition. I should say this, the arrow of aspiration that shoots itself out into the world, but then immediately has an intuitive hit that pierces us. So it's like whoosh, out into the world, and then this piercing of intuition, like aha, there's an aha. Good. So, and the path maker and the pathfinder and the willingness to shake off our fears. Scorpio will grip. Scorpio will be like, at a certain level, Scorpio will grip and hold and wrestle. Sagittarius will shake off its fears and will keep the momentum going. So as I'm continuing to talk about Sagittarius, thank you, Quinn. I'm glad you liked the poem. That makes me happy. Let's share where Sagittarius is in your chart. So just type it in if you know it. Are you a Sagittarius sun? Are you a Sagittarius rising? Are you a Sagittarius moon? Do you have Venus in Sagittarius? Today the Venus is in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the arrow. That's the symbol in your chart. So Susan's got a moon in the 8th. Okay, Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter in Sag. Woo, Lisa. Double Sag, rising and birth sign. Yes, Jenny, you are Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the storyteller. Jenny is a storyteller. It is the ultimate storyteller. It says, let me take you on a great adventure. Quinn, Sun, Jupiter, progressed moon in 10th and 11th, depending on the house system, sun sign. Great. We've got a lot of Sagittarius in the room. I already feel better. Somehow Sagittarians always lift us. Because there is the energy of the preacher, there is the energy of the teacher, there is the energy of the storyteller in Sagittarius. And you know how it is to be told a good story? It's beautiful. You just sit down and you go like, oh, and then hopefully after a good story, you feel inspired, you feel redeemed, you feel like you've experienced something outside of yourself. And that's what Sagittarians want to understand and know in their beings. They want to know something outside of the mundane. They want to know something outside of themselves. And so they are the citizens of the world. They are the planetary citizens in the house, the planetary citizens. Yes, and they are, Sagittarius is deeply interested, thank goodness, in cultural diversity, deeply interested in who are you and how are you different than me and what can I learn from you? And then how can I tell a story about you or, share your story in a way that lets us all feel closer together. So, Sagittarius is ever expanding. It's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is enormous. Jupiter is the largest planet. And so Sagittarius has that expansive quality. If you think about Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn all lined up next to each other, Scorpio is kind of like the valley. It's like we go down, it could even be lower than the valley, but let's just say they're the depths of Scorpio. Sagittarius is the plain that we gallop across, and Capricorn is the mountain that we climb. So in Sagittarius, you better believe, imagine yourself on your horse galloping and your hair is streaming back. And often Sagittarians do have long hair, by the way. It's just one of the funny things. Sometimes physiognomy and morphology are fascinating. Like Aquarians often have really curly hair and Sagittarians often have the long hair. And of course, not always, but sometimes you see these things that you have to note. So Sagittarius is deeply, deeply, deeply interested in making life a journey, right? It's interested in the quest. It loves learning. But different than Gemini, it doesn't just like to collect the facts. It wants to weave them together and make sense of them. It rules the wisdom of the ages. You know, it wants to take fact and infuse it with love and make it wisdom. Yeah, can you feel that? So there's with Sagittarius, there's like broad inquiry, broad and like they want to dive deep into the depths of things. They want to learn fully. They want to study. Sagittarius rules higher education, right? So today, as we're talking, and I always like to start this way, or I always like to make sure that I share the chart for a second. So here is the chart of the now. And whenever we're talking about Sagittarius, we're talking about this sign right here, but we're also talking about the 9th house. So you see the circle divided up into 12 sections. Here is the 9th house. This is the Sagittarius house. This is the area that rules all kinds of Sagittarius things like higher education, travel, adventure, the spiritual path, inspiration, vision. Sagittarians are the visionaries as well. And isn't it interesting that we could also say the 8th house is the house of the valley, the 9th house is the house of the plain, the travel, and the 10th house is the house of the mountain. And so we have to clarify our dreams and our hopes and our wishes and our aspirations before we get to the mountain so we don't climb the wrong mountain, right? So if you have a lot of planets also in the 9th house, this is also you're a very Sagittarian being as well. But like I said, this is the chart of today. This is the chart of this moment. So isn't it interesting that Venus is in Sagittarius in this moment? Thank goodness, because Venus is such a planet of the soul's calling and such a planet of what we value. And Sagittarius says, we have to keep our mind on the highest ideals and the highest visions. So Sagittarius has a phrase, and actually it has a couple of phrases given in Esoteric Astrology by Alice Bailey. And the first phrase is more about our personality selves. And that phrase is, let food be sought. Now, what in the world, right? What does that mean? Well, let food be sought. Think about that. It's like, ooh, yum. I'm going, yes, that deliciousness, more of that. So it's got this hunger to it. Sagittarius at the early level wants to satiate desire. And it wants to have experience. And so it will, my dad always uses this phrase. He's an astrologer, for those of you that don't know. And he says of Sagittarius, she got on her horse and rode off in 10 different directions, right? That's the early Sagittarius. Gallop. And then you get there and you're like, oh, not this, not this, not this. And so you can feel completely, wildly scattered. But eventually, Sagittarius becomes the one-pointed disciple. It becomes the one that after it's had the broad visions and broad journeys, and after it's traveled the world, it comes home to itself and decides the path that it will travel. And so the first phrase is, let food be sought. And what happens, Sagittarius is the centaur, right? At least that was the early symbol for Sagittarius, was the man and horse are one. And the horse is much as in charge as the man. So we could say though horses are gorgeous and wise animals. In this analogy, we're saying the horse is the lower part of our nature, and we're not able to separate our thinking mechanism. We're just using our mind to pursue desire. We're just using all our mental faculties to say, I'm hungry. Does that make some sense? Can you feel that? And there's a difference then when we are the knight or the knightess or the prince, you know, the queen or the king. There's a difference when we're on the horse and we're riding it, and we can direct where we are meant to go, and we can get off the horse, and we can have a mission. Don Quixote, the most Sagittarius story of them all, you know, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, this is my quest. It's the absolute Sagittarian story. My mother is a Sagittarius rising, and she went through a period of time for like 15 years where she would take these great trips all over the place. And on the way to the airport, she would always play To Dream the Impossible Dream. And she would, you know, sing along with it. And it's that quest that calls us. A Sagittarius needs a mission. It needs a mission, or it's just going to be it's going to be split. And sometimes, by the way, like a Sagittarius mission is, because Sagittarius rules the legs and rules the circulatory system, sometimes that mission has to be a physical one. It has to be like an athletic one. There are a lot of athletes that have strong Sagittarius. There can be a strong physicality. So the interesting thing about Sagittarius is that unless you might be the outer traveler that's climbing the mountains and seeing the world and never stopping and being very physical and being very athletic, or you might be the inner traveler, which is the philosophical Sagittarius that says, I want to understand all the religions and all the paths and all the approaches to the one God. And do you know? So there is an inner and an outer Sagittarius. So as we go from let food be sought to, you know, the one who rides the horse and directs the mission, we get to the phrase, I see the goal, I reach the goal, and then I see another. So we become directed and we name where we're headed. And this is where the greatest visionaries, you know, come in, where they say, I see where we can go together. Let's go there together. Or, you know, of course, before that, we have the stage of I see where I can go, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to achieve that goal. The danger with Sagittarius is that we see where we want to go, we go there, and then we just immediately have the next place we want to go. So we have to every time I work with a Sagittarius client, it's like, wait, you achieved your goal. Did you actually notice that? Did you actually celebrate that? Did you actually give yourself credit for that? Or did you immediately feel like the next thing, you know? And I see this in I have a 12-year-old son, and I see this in him in a very young way, in the sense that he'll have something that he really wants, you know? I want that bike. I'm going to be a BMXer. I'm going to bike. Finally, on his birthday, he gets the bike. And one day later, what is it? You know, it's something entirely different. I mean, he does follow through. He's got some Capricorn, but, you know, but also you can feel that part of him that's just like on to the next thing. And so we have to check that in ourselves. We have to check that in ourselves when we have strong Sagittarius. So I see the goal, I reach the goal, and then I see another. So we go from the ultimate journey of the Sagittarius is to become the one-pointed disciple, to have a vision, and to then, in some way or another, inspire and uplift humanity to reach that vision with you, you know, or to encourage each person to reach their mission. What do the best teachers in the world do? You in this room, oh Sagittarius beings, you're some of the best teachers, because you encourage people to reach their goal. You encourage people to go where they want, where they have envisioned for themselves. That is the mentor. Sagittarius is the mentor and the teacher. Now, that's at the highest level. Of course, there are tactless, exaggerating, reckless Sagittariuses, you know. I mean, at a more tricky level, Sagittarius can like I said, just have a wanderlust, never stop moving, never stop going after what they're hungry for. They can have a lack of restraint. They can be totally restless. They can have a kind of blind optimism, even in the face of like the darkest hour when they really might have to dig in. They're like, it's going to be okay, which sometimes we need to hear. And sometimes we need to go, it's actually not okay right now. And we need to fix it, you know? So and you've probably heard with Sagittarius, you know, you can have a bluntness, like boom, it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe they just said that. Or, and then you wish you could take it back. It's like foot in the mouth disease kind of thing. You know, I mean, that exists for Sagittarius as well. Look, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So the best of Jupiter is the teacher, the abundant one, the generous one, the mentor, the one who wants to help you grow out of an old self. And the trickiest part is that it just wants more and more and more, or that it's too much. It's too much for the circumstance. And so Sagittarius always has to check it's, you know, sometimes it's too muchness, and find the ways that it can deliver information that might not be, and all of this, you know. I mean, look, every sign has its really difficult part. And some Sagittarius can be totally fundamentalist, can be totally like, this is the only way. I do see a lot of people with like Saturn and Sagittarius, strong ninth house, that maybe were raised in a particular tradition that's like, this is the only way, where the one-pointed disciple becomes the narrow vision. And so at first Sagittarius can be blinded, and then it needs to keep opening and saying, oh my gosh, you mean there's this path and this path and this path? So can you see how it's both and? On one hand, we can get distracted by the paths, but on another hand, we can say, oh my gosh, I was raised in a way that made me think this is the only way. And then we get our, you know, then we get to educate ourselves. That's what education is about too, right? I mean, that's why higher education is so connected to this, is we all come from limited perspectives, and education helps us become more soul infused, because we recognize that there's someone other, you know, there are perspectives other than our own. I'm stating the obvious, but you can see the Sagittarius path of this. Yeah. So making sense? Are there questions? Please, if you have questions, write them in. I'm happy to weave them in as we go. You know, yeah, I mean, if your sun is shining in the ninth house, whatever sign it's in, you still carry the energy of the teacher. If your sun is shining in the ninth house, you still are going to have a great desire to expand, no matter what sign it's in, you know? So the ninth house carries that flavor as well. So I just mentioned, you know, a whole bunch of the more tricky parts of Sagittarius. And I also just want to name a few more of the best qualities. I mean, it has intuition. It is the arrow of intuition. It's like, oh, I just know. Oh, I just know. You know, have you ever experienced that, you strong Sagittarius people? It's like it's just direct, straight knowledge. It's not even that you need to have studied or to have proved it to yourself. It's like direct knowledge, like gnosis, like it's right there. That's beautiful part of Sagittarius. It does look. Jupiter is the personality centered ruler. So we've been talking about Jupiter, but the Earth is the soul-centered ruler. So this is just so fascinating that the Earth, our little planet, is the most important planet for a Sagittarius. Why? Because Sagittarius does consider itself a global citizen, because it does consider the planet deeply. Many Sagittarians have causes connected to our planetary welfare and wellness. Yeah. And because the Earth says you have to make your ideals and your vision practical and pragmatic, and you have to act on them. So it says to a Sagittarius, where in the world, where in the world are you going to act on your beliefs and on your ideals? So where should we use our gifts? Asks the earth part of Sagittarius. How can we infuse, this is another important thing, how can we infuse matter, mother matter? How can we infuse the material world with soulful ideals? How can we, it can't just be pie in the sky, it has to be infused, right? So that's why the earth rules Sagittarius, the practicality, and by the way, in the chart, the earth is opposite the sun. So wherever your sun is in your chart, wherever the circle is, wherever the circle with the dot is, exactly opposite it is your earth. And that says a lot about your field of service and where you might be of service. So that's worth looking at, what house it's in. For example, I'll just bring up this chart again. If this were a human being, is the clock? Yeah. If this were human being, here's the sun in Capricorn today. Opposite would be this, you would see it right down here, would be the earth in Cancer in the 4th house. So here are all these Capricorn purpose and responsibility and duty and parental energy. But if the earth is in the 4th house in Cancer, there's something about the great mother energy and home and homeland where you might serve. You might fulfill your purpose in a very deeply feminine, lighted house, home sort of way. So you always have to look, a mothering, nourishing, producing sort of way. So you always have to look to exactly where the earth falls in your chart, particularly if you are a Sagittarius, right? For all of us, but because it's such an important planet for a Sagittarius, the earth, you have to know where the earth is and you have to know what it invites you to do. Okay. And so there was a question. Let's see, hang on. Gives us a chance to catch our breath from my ongoing monologue. Okay, so what's the antidote to the overwhelm of ideas and being pulled in a million different directions? Yeah, beautiful question. So one of the things I would say immediately is we get excited about something, we learn about something. We're like, I'm gonna go learn this language. And just as we really start to get fluent or whatever, that's the moment when we might start to take off in another direction. So one of the things I would say is it's so important for Sagittarius to integrate, to take in what it has learned, to integrate that energy, to make sure that you find where that lands in yourself before you take off again. You can still take off. You can still take off and go on the next adventure, but you have to not just have it be like, well, I did that. You have to find the place that it really has touched you. I would also say that as we get older, as we have life experience, we just necessarily start to say, maybe I don't have to follow that quest all the way through. Maybe fire always needs patience. Fire always needs a moment before it takes off. And so, a Sagittarius always should sit with itself for a bit before it signs up for graduate school, or before it decides that it's going to move to Paris to become fluent in French or whatever. It has to sit with itself for a moment and make sure that this is part of the bigger vision. Think about vision boards and collages. And, I do one of these every year. I don't call it a vision board, but I call it a collage of how I want to feel and what I'm looking to for the year. And if some idea comes that isn't in resonance with that, I have to gently learn to start saying no, so that the path starts to become more clear, the path that I want to walk. Like what is your greatest soul's calling? What is your secret inner name? That's a big question, you know? Like, what are you here to sing into the world? And then you have to start letting go of the things that do not truly respond to that, truly resonate with that. So, yeah, okay, I hope that's helpful. All right. And then Brooke asks, I'm curious about a possible Sagittarius trait. I see the goal, and before I've reached it, I shift towards another goal. That is Brooke, that is a Sagittarius trait. And so maybe that's also another point of learning. If you see the goal and you're headed towards it, say to yourself, I am going to get to that goal. I mean, don't make the goals so gigantic that you can't reach them, but actually make a tiny goal so that you can reach it. That's important for a Sagittarius, not to be, it's so huge and so lofty. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to teach people to love one another. I'm going to, whatever it is, but to say, I'm going to bake my neighbor cookies or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like to start out with the smaller things, or I'm going to finish that script. I'm going to finish the script, even if I don't send it out into the world. Do you know? So you have to have feelings of completion. It's important to have feelings of completion. Okay. So yeah, I used to do the dishes and never finish doing the dishes. This is my Aries. It's my Aries and Sagittarius. I used to be like, oh God, do dishes. And then I'd be like, there were 3 left. And I'd be like, can't do it. So I started to do this practice of like, I got to finish doing the dishes. And I know that sounds crazy, but it helps. What's that kind of crazy thing in your life that you don't finish, that you don't complete, that you don't see through, right? Also, so important, the Sagittarius education of movement. I didn't say that quite right, but you know, movement is important for a Sagittarius to get our bodies moving, because once we get our bodies moving and headed in a certain direction, like if we say, I'm going to walk for a mile, we walk for a mile, like our bodies can teach us about reaching a goal. It's so hard for me to sit, says Jenny. Yes. And Lisa, Moon is in Gemini. So, you know, that's interesting, the whole Gemini Sagittarius thing, because Gemini has its own way of scattering. Gemini has its own way of like having too much in its head. And Sagittarius can actually save a Gemini moon from too muchness, from like thinking about thinking. Sagittarius can say like, what's the one thing that we need to think about? Or how can we synthesize what you're thinking about? So they're both, Gemini and Sagittarius are the 2 great signs of the mind, the power of the mind. And whereas Gemini is more of, you know, you could say rational, Sagittarius is more inspirational. Whereas Gemini is more concrete, Sagittarius is more abstract. Whereas you could also say, whereas Gemini is more factual, Sagittarius can exaggerate. You can go there as well. You know, it's interesting. Because on one hand, Gemini can be tangential. It can be like, oh, so many different things to talk about and think about. And Sagittarius can get straight to the point. It can call it like it is. But on the other hand, sometimes Gemini can get so concrete and factual that's boring for a Sagittarius. It's like, let's tell a big story, you know, so it can exaggerate things. And you could say that Gemini is interested in facts, whereas Sagittarius is interested in the significance of those facts. It's not just interested in the pure concrete information, right? So, and we could also even say, like I've been calling Sagittarius the teacher, which it absolutely is, but Gemini sometimes can be more associated with the teacher, and Sagittarius can be associated with that infusion, the preacher energy, the visionary energy. Of course, a teacher can be, you know, can have that quality of deep visionary as well, you know, but you can sometimes sort of, you have to kind of parse it out. So let's talk about a couple more things. There's so much to say. So a Sagittarius really does have to learn how to prioritize, how to be selective. It has to learn to find its direction, so it's not galloping off. You know, also any fire sign sort of has to learn to be a part of a team, because it's so like, I'm just doing this, I'm on my horse, I'm riding. It actually has to wait for people to catch up so that you can go somewhere together, right? It has to learn how to use words with power and effectiveness, so it's not like, you know, splashing it out there. And then there's a self-discipline required with Sagittarius too. It's almost like you learn to ride the horse. Yeah. So questions for Sagittarius would be, what do you envision as your goal? And it doesn't have to be like, let it be a small goal or let it be a big goal, but work with the idea of what you're envisioning in your life. Even if it's not precise, you could have a goal that is about a texture in your life, like a goal of softness, a goal of surrender, a goal of rest. I mean, it doesn't have to be a goal of, I'm going to get in shape, whatever. You know, it's like it can have a different texture. But what is your goal? What is your vision for yourself? And what's your most direct path to it? These are deeply Sagittarius questions. And then how can you work to achieve the highest vision or perspective for yourself? Like, if you really allow yourself to think in the largest terms and allow yourself to say, this is my gift to bring, and this is my vision for myself in the world. I mean, really allow yourself to get bigger with Sagittarius, and not to just sort of resign yourself to a certain grind or daily task. You know, that's why Virgo and Sagittarius are different. Now, I'm talking about Virgo in its, you know, more concrete form, but like Virgo is into the minutia of things and into the daily tasks and loves the rhythm of the daily tasks. And Sagittarius wants none of it. None of it. I remember my dad being like, I don't know how to do the dishes. Right? Just like, you know, the feeling of like, this doesn't make sense to me, right? But we taught him how. But you know, Sagittarius is big picture, big vision. Yeah, all men say that, Susan. Yes, it's so true. Okay, so we've talked about the planetary rulers. We've talked about Jupiter and the Earth as the planetary rulers. I do want to also say to you that, interestingly enough, I've talked a little bit about planets where the sign is not as comfortable, or where the planet is not as comfortable working through the sign. So one of the ways that one of the planets that's not as comfortable working through Sagittarius is Mercury. Isn't that interesting? Because Sagittarius is it's a big mental energy, but it's much more the abstract, big vision, big generous dream. And Mercury is much more interested in the facts and much more interested in A plus B and the quick communication. So it's not as comfortable in Sagittarius. Mercury is said to be in detriment in Sagittarius. So it's just interesting to see which planets feel really like, ooh, I love to work through this. So Jupiter loves to work through Sagittarius. The Earth loves to work through Sagittarius, but not Mercury. Mercury's a little out of sorts there. So it's important to know these things. So let's go through. I wanted to read you this quote, actually. Any of you heard of Alan Oken? He's a wonderful astrologer. I highly recommend him. He's now in his 70s, but he's spent his whole life teaching astrology, and specifically soul-centered astrology. And I've gotten to work with him over the years, and he's definitely he's got a good Instagram and all of that. You know, he's a wise man. And his invitation for Sagittarius is this. He says the soul-centered Sagittarius, I like how he puts it. He says, the mission is to gain control of the personality so that it may become the perfect steed for the soul's goal, to teach the ways of walking the path. So, you know, you gotta rein it in. Sagittarius has to be reined in just enough to get on the horse and go in the direction of your mission and not diffuse the energy. Have I said enough about how buoyant and enthusiastic and joyful Sagittarius is? Like how it can really bring light into a room, and it can really wake people up to their own inspiration. I mean, that's so important to hear that. Say more about that. But it's true. You know, it's like the Santa Claus of planets. It's like, hello, what do you want? I'm in a good mood. I'm laughing. You know, I mean, there's a joy to Sagittarius, and there is a buoyancy and a lightness. And look, I mean, it's ruled by Jupiter. Who doesn't want more Jupiter in their life? I mean, Jupiter says yes. Jupiter helps us grow and expand, right? So, one other thing I could say as an overall overarching thing for Sagittarius is that it is a brilliant sign, and what it needs to do, or what it wants to do, is to keep cultivating the mind in its largest sense, so that it can have, so that it finds its mission. So it wants to learn, and it wants to cultivate the power of the mind. So we can't forget that about Sagittarius, is that mental brilliance. It's a combination of the mental brilliance and the devotion and mission and aspiration. So it's the intelligence, but it's also got a lot of like, it's got a lot of devotion. It's got a lot of aspiration. It's like, let's do this. So they're kind of strange bedfellows, but they can find ways to work together. And so what I've always done in these classes thus far is to journey through just a little bit of the comparisons of each sign. So let's just do a quick, like, what can each sign teach Sagittarius? And we'll plant a few seeds, right? So what can Aries teach Sagittarius? In a way, you know, there's such similarity there, because the personality centered ruler of Aries is Mars, and of Sagittarius it's Jupiter, and they're both so enthusiastic. But I would maybe say what Aries can teach is, like, don't get so zealous about one big idea that you too prematurely. Aries can say, let's come up with a few before you decide that you're committing your life to it. You know, so Aries can light the match several times for the Sagittarius, and can say, let's make sure that we have considered before we get on our horse and ride, and let's brainstorm together. And I would also say that Aries has tremendous will. And though sometimes it has a hard time with follow through, when it gets in its groove and it's like, this is what I'm doing, you know, the will is strong. And so it could lend that to Sagittarius as well. But they really love each other. They get along well. They are always, you know, feeding one another with enthusiasm. There's a tremendous enthusiasm. Taurus and Sagittarius are radically different. Taurus, of course, will bring quiet and steadiness to the sometimes recklessness, or sometimes restlessness of Sagittarius. So remember how I was saying, like, the straight arrow of intuition with Sagittarius, that's like, I know it. Taurus is much more like, I will sit for an hour and listen, and I will come to know something. You know, it's a slower awareness. It's a slower revelation. Athletically, you know, Taurus would be the one that's like lifting the heavy weights and getting stronger and stronger over time. And Sagittarius would be like the sprinter, the 100-yard dash, the one that's just running, and that's, or, you know, kicking, right? Did this parts of the body, the legs and the circulatory system, right? So it's moving, and Taurus is not moving, right? So every Sagittarius needs a little bit of help sometimes to, you said I can't sit. Well, guess who can sit? Taurus. So sit on a Taurus's lap. That's your that's your assignment. No, but really it's like sit and then see what happens as you sit. I had a teacher once that said, sit for 5 minutes on the couch without doing anything. See if you can do it. And I couldn't. But then, you practice, like, because this, that, this, sit with yourself. It's hard. It's hard to sit with yourself and not go like, I'm sitting, eating, and zoning out. Like, we can do that. We can eat 3 pints of ice cream, right? But it's hard to really sit with ourselves. Oh, I love that. I'm a Taurus rising, Sag moon. Don't know if I'm coming or going. Well, this is a good example for Susan. She's a Taurus rising, so she is here for the Taurian energy. So you are here to cultivate that, Susan. You're here to grow that energy in you, that steadfast, quiet, internal knowing. You sit for enlightenment. And that doesn't have to be literally sitting. I can be walking and having a Taurian experience, right? But there's something deeply quieting and about trusting the rhythms that Sagittarius doesn't initially know. I've talked a little bit about Gemini and Sagittarius already. And so those are the, Gemini will get a Sagittarius to get the facts and to think concretely about things and not just idealistically. So Gemini's like, okay, great. I'm glad we're on that mission, but have you thought about how much food we need? Have you thought about what temperature it's going to be? Have you thought about the fact that you're enthusiastic, but the 10 other people with you aren't? I mean, whatever. It's just like, it gets you to, to think about the brass tacks of things, right? So that's one way, but we talked about some other ways with Gemini and Sagittarius. Cancer and Sagittarius, wildly different. Why? Because they're 150 degrees away from one another, which is a kind of awkward angle. But can you feel already, just the minute I say it, Cancer is let's stay home and be quiet and nourished and stay close to mama. Let's not leave the block on which we were born. Let's buy the house next to our parents' house. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that's the Cancerian energy. And Sagittarius is like, I cannot wait to get out of here. My daughter wants to go to college in England. She's like, she has a perfectly lovely childhood. We all love each other, but she's like, get me out of this place. Like, she's ready to have adventures, right? She's ready to explore, which is interesting because she actually has a lot of Cancer energy, but there you go. But that energy of like, go, let me educate myself in new ways. But Cancer will always say to a Sagittarius, you have somewhere to come home to. And Cancer will say, come home to yourself. Come, make sure that you've built a lighted house within yourself so that you don't always feel like it's outside of yourself. So Cancer can soothe the Sagittarius with mama love and say, you don't always have to be running. You don't always have to be running. It's okay to sit and eat a pot of soup. Leo and Sagittarius. Leo, I would say Leo gives the gift of expression. Leo gives the gift of expression to Sagittarius. Sagittarius might get very mental, might get stuck in the head a bit. I mean, it loves to have experience, but it can also get deeply philosophical and deeply internal too. So Leo will always be like, express what you learn, express yourself. Don't embody it. Again, they're so happy together. They're just like, let's burn bright together. In fact, today I chose 2 cards for our class and I got Mighty Radiance. That's pretty, I would say mighty is Sagittarius and Radiance is Leo. So that's the Leo and Sagittarius, Mighty Radiance. Virgo and Sagittarius, I talked about it. My classic offering of Virgo and Sagittarius is that it's like Sagittarius is the travel agent and says, let's go to Australia. This combo is the travel agent, and Sagittarius is like, we're going to Hawaii, and Virgo is like, here are all the details. Here's all the reservations. Here's where we're eating on Tuesday night at 6:30. Don't be late. And Sagittarius is like, but I got you to Hawaii, right? So Sagittarius is, another way to say it is Sagittarius is I want to study this spiritual path. I want to give myself to this spiritual path. And Virgo says, well, then guess what? Every day, every morning at 4 a.m., you're showing up on this mat. Or guess what? That means you have to eat in a new way. Or guess what? You know, these are the practices and rhythms of what it means to be on this path. So Virgo is going to give Sagittarius a practice and a practicality. Scorpio and Sagittarius, Libra and Sagittarius, they both love the law. They both love truth. They both love integrity. They both love like getting to, like, naming it and living according to the moral compass. So Libra really will collaborate. They're sextile one another. They're 60 degrees apart. So it's fire and air. They're great together. And Libra will also say, let me remind you about right relationship. Let me remind you to treat, to not just bluster out whatever it is you have to say without carefully thinking a little bit about to whom you are speaking or how you might say it with greater grace and care so that they can actually hear it, right? Scorpio and Sagittarius, it's kind of one of the most dramatic changes. Scorpio will always bring Sagittarius into the depths and will say, maybe, will introduce loss to a Sagittarius, will introduce tenacity to a Sagittarius, will introduce like, don't give up on your goal yet. Don't shoot off to another goal yet. You finish this one. Scorpio is really like digs in and wants a ferocity about getting to the root of the root. And Sagittarius, again, will sometimes zoom off before it's really gotten to the heart of the matter. Capricorn and Sagittarius, the best way to say it is, it says, well, once you've galloped across the plain, I'm going to work hard with you to fulfill that vision. So I will do everything in my power to help you climb the mountain of your vision, but you've got to have the vision before we can climb together. So I'll help you create the structure and the plan and all of that, but you have to come with the inspiration, and you have to come with the vision, and you have to come with the dream, and then I'll help you create all the practical and I'll give you the 5-year plan. Here we go, right? Aquarius and Sagittarius, I mentioned they love each other. Freedom, 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 freedom. They both do not want to be pinned down. I didn't say that about Sagittarius, actually. Sagittarius is the eternal bachelor or bachelorette because they don't want to be pinned down. They want to be like, there's more to, I sort of said it in another way. There's more to taste. There's more to experience, right? And Aquarius sort of has its own version of that, which is like, don't tell me the way to go. I'm going my own way. So they're great. Like, they should be in one of those motorcycles that has a sidecar together. They're like, let's go our own way. Yeah. And I would just say that Sagittarius helps find the stories and the language and that tell us stories of diversity and planetary global citizenry that is absolutely necessary for the age of Aquarius. And then Pisces and Sagittarius, Pisces is the great, compassionate ocean of love that you get to dive into after all the questing. And so it kind of invites us into the quietest place with the divine. So Sagittarius might travel a lot of different paths to the divine and try to find a lot of different ways to the truth. But Pisces ultimately says, here they all are swirling in this ocean, just come and float in it, So it really offers a lot of compassion to the restlessness of Sagittarius. So that's just, these are just tastes, right? But Are there questions? Are there thoughts? Are there recognitions of self? Are there little tiny stories that make sense as a Sagittarius story in your life? Yes, it's, this is a good energy to talk about at the beginning of a new year. And if you feel exhausted by it, like, what are my goals? What are my visions? Whatever, that's fire. Fire has that quality of like, but then like, just make it real for yourself, quiet yourself down and just say, what is a dream that I'm holding right now? Like, be your tender self. And as a little girl, as a little boy, just like be tender with yourself and be like, well, what is something that would feel inspiring to me, that would feel delicious to me, that would feel like if I got to do this, I could inspire others because I was happy doing it. What stories do you want to tell? Brooke asks, is there anything about this age of Aquarius that is presenting a particular calling or challenge to Sagittarius? Not a challenge. It's presenting like an opportunity to come forward with the vision that you hold for the planet. The most evolved Sagittarians are holding the vision of what we need now in the Aquarian age, which is we are all equally important. It's fundamental that we honor one another's paths, and Sagittarius can speak about that and can tell stories about that and can educate. We need to be educated. We need to be educated in matters of the soul, truly. We need to know what the biggest journey is. Sagittarius says, yes, a life is an interesting small journey, but guess what? You've had thousands. So what's the biggest journey? And where are you headed? And what are you cultivating? It's said that we have the same rising sign sometimes for 6 or 7 lifetimes. This is posited in the Alice Bailey teachings. And it's like, so what are we doing? What are we really trying to gather into ourselves by studying that energy and apprenticing to that energy again and again and again, So in any case, I think that Sagittarius can come forward with tremendous vision and aspiration for humanity and tell the stories that we need in this Aquarian age, which is like, we can only do this together. And they're great friends. Anything else? Yeah. I'm not going to read you the whole poem, but there is a poem another poem that I wrote, another very Sagittarius poem. And the title of it is just Freedom Yet to Find. And it's very Sagittarian as well. And I'm just going to read you the last 5 little stanzas. They're just small. So it says this: what is known is always knocking. You do not have to answer. Fling open the back door to the yes of unspeakable light and boundless time. The invitation ever exists. If there is a hint, whiff, touch, whisper of freedom left to find, ready your ship, let the winds blow. Refuse the map of discovered worlds. Let love be your compass. Set sail. So that's my invitation for all of us this year. And I'll just put it this way. It's my own invitation to myself, which is to refuse the map of discovered worlds. Sagittarius says, oh my gosh, there's so much left to discover. Why are we hanging out in what we've already discovered? Let's keep growing. That's the mandate of Sagittarius. Let's keep growing. Let's keep experimenting. Let's keep daring ourselves into new uncharted territory. All right, my friends, that was fun. Thank you. I am deeply appreciative of you being here with me. I really am. And next week is Capricorn. That will have a very different flavor. And we're almost done, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And for those of you that are a little bit further along with astrology, just know that this Sunday, I'm launching a new intermediate class where we're studying aspects and we're studying transits and we're studying how planets talk to each other. And if that appeals to you, you can reach out to me. So thank you, my friends. Happy New Year. Take care of yourselves at this time. Big love.